Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Grover. I'm the Executive Director of Guildhall. I want to welcome you to Ring the Alarm with Derrick Adams and Renee Cox. I want to start by thanking Phyllis Hollis, who is a member of our Board of Trustees and the founder of Cerebral Woman, which is an online marketing platform designed to promote emerging and mid-career artists of color and female artists. You can learn more at cerebralwoman.com. This conversation is the first in a series leading up to a 2023 exhibition that will be curated by the renowned artist Renee Cox for Guildhall. Renee and Derrick actually met in 1998 through Rush Philanthropic Arts Foundation, where Derrick worked under many titles, but ultimately curatorial director. Russell and Danny Simmons are his cousins, by the way. Renee curated a show there in '98 titled One, and thus began a multi-decade conversation between Renee and Derrick. So the format of this talk is it will run 45 minutes. That will be the conversation part of it between Renee and Derrick. That'll be followed by a Q&A. So if you could post your questions in the chat box during the conversation, that I will aggregate them and I'll return to the screen at the end and I will ask your questions. So Derrick Adams is a multidisciplinary New York-based artist working in performance, video, sound, and mixed media. He was born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1970. He received his MFA from Columbia University and his BFA from Pratt Institute. He's an alumnus of the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture and the Marie Walsh Sharp Foundation Studio Program. Derrick is a recipient of a Robert Rauschenberg Foundation residency, a Gordon Parks Foundation fellowship, a Studio Museum Joyce Alexander Wien Artist Prize, and a Louis Comfort Tiffany Award. Adams has been the subject of numerous solo exhibitions, most recently Buoyant at the Hudson River Museum, which closed last weekend and is traveling now to St. Petersburg, Florida. His exhibitions and performances have been shown at MoMA PS1, Brooklyn Museum of Art, Studio Museum in Harlem, and he is in the permanent collections of the Metropolitan Museum, Studio Museum, etc. So thank you for being here, Derrick. Renee Cox was born in Colgate, Jamaica in 1960. She makes photographs, collages, and installations that draw on art history, fashion, photography, and popular culture. Her work invokes a critical vision of female sexuality, beauty, power, and heroism through nudity, religious imagery, and symbolism that inform her interdisciplinary process. Cox received her BA from Syracuse University and her MFA from the School of Visual Arts. She was a participant in the Whitney Museum of American Art Independent Study Program, and her work has been included in solo and group exhibitions at prominent institutions, including the Tate Liverpool, the New Museum, Brooklyn Museum, the Whitney Museum, to name a few. She's an associate professor at Columbia University and has lectured at Yale College of Art, NYU, Parsons, etc. She lives and works in Manhattan and Amagansett. Okay, so we're going to start the conversation with a few slides, and then Derrick and Renee will join us on screen. Again, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Derrick, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. So people, you're just getting a little overview. This is Derrick Adams' work you're looking at right now. And I guess if they wanted to know more, Derrick, you have a website they could go to too, or the Instagram or something?
That is derrickadams.com.
Okay, and I'm reneecox.org. So if you want to, like, you know, get some other imagery going or whatever while we're having a conversation, please feel free to go to our websites.
Yes.
That's Derrick.
Yeah, that's me.
Finally been liberated from the box. Lord of mercy.
Yep. Wow. Love this one.
Thank you. That's down in Jamaica, Queen Nanny. And the controversial piece, Your Mama's Last Supper.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
I want to thank Guildhall for making this possible, and also Derrick Adams, of course, for taking the time out to have this conversation that we would ordinarily just have a conversation anyway.
Yeah,
About
basically.
yeah.
It's
So,
great to have, it's great to be here, virtually. I mean, it's the best way we can be at this moment, but, to allow people to experience Renee and I having conversations that we've had ever since we've met in 1998. And this was kind of brought to life with the efforts of Phyllis Hollis, who is a very dear friend to both of us, and
absolutely.
also a very important person to Guildhall. So it's exciting to be here and have um, you guys who's out there take part in our conversation, talking about some of the history that we've had together and some of the experiences we've had that really shaped our work and the way we see things and the way we feel is important for us to communicate through our work, through our practice.
Right. Yeah, and I'm just happy that your work is so joyful and it speaks to us as human beings, us who want to have that sense of relaxation. And there was something that I read you were talking about MLK, Martin Luther King, and the photographs that you saw of him on
Jet Magazine.
vacation,
Yeah.
poolside, just chilling.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was such an interesting spread. It was in a Jet magazine, I think, I forgot what year, but it was an image of his family, he and his family on vacation in Jamaica at a resort. And they were images of him, of this family kind of just relaxing, having breakfast, seeming very, normal as I know it, as you know it. But these images are not necessarily the images you see when you see the representation of Black life. I think that the way media is constructed, or the way that we've accepted even our role in media as this kind of uh, figure or representation that is one dimensional. And I think that we are multidimensional. And the fact that these images of the kings relaxing does not diminish their importance of protest and their importance of their contribution to civil rights. And my work just kind of came about just, especially the work that I've been making over the past 10 years, really came out looking at all of my peers as social gatherings. And these people that we both know are very active socially and politically in a lot of different things. And they're writers and artists and politicians. But a lot of times when we're together, we're in these social settings where we're laughing and talking about family and just things that we like. And I said to myself one day, I'm like, this is what people should also see. They should
Right.
see that we have other things that we're doing. Like, it doesn't diminish the fact that we're still involved in this very like toxic culture that we have to kind of push up, push against constantly. We've always done it, but what people are
Right.
lacking is seeing us in this kind of like more humanizing perspective that is not taken away from the other thing. It's, to me, I think it's even more powerful in some ways because it shows that regardless of all these things that we have to deal with, we still have this time that we share with each other, and it's a time that we need. Like, you need this time in order to be able to move forward and deal with the other, I would say, shit that you have to deal with. You need to have this time where you can reflect. And I looked around at this crowd of people, Renee included, and we're just laughing and talking, and we're talking about everything, politics,
Right.
life, fashion, popular culture.
Because
I'm
it's
like,
a job trying to break up those stereotypes. I can tell you that. Lord of mercy. You know, that's a lot of work. You know, going back in over the last 400 years and just trying to, like, you know, no, we're not just this. You know, we're multi-dimensional people. And sometimes it's funny because I find also when we do show the leisure part of our lives, some people like are almost offended by that because they want to put us in this category of like, oh, like, I don't know, you're from the projects, no disrespect to the projects or whatever, but you know, oh, you're supposed to be the victim. And I'm always like, that's the last thing in the world that I'm ever going to represent is me or anything that I'm doing as a victim. I am not a victim.
Exactly. You know, it's not that culture and society has not tried to victimize us, but also you know, that's something that we know to be true. But you know, we, you know, for the time that we spend here and the time we spent on Earth, we have been able to accomplish many things that not only we have benefited from, but other people have benefited from. Everything from, you know, the most trivial objects that are functional in popular culture into things that are scientifically necessary in order for us to survive. And with that said, it's really important for me as an artist to make sure that the next generation see us in the most dimensional way, and you know, and not that I would not like to see them see works that are more overtly dealing with politics in a way that is very literal and very direct. I want to give them other options to look at themselves, and I want to give them other options to, you know, I don't think Black people need to be reminded of racism, you know, like any Black person that has common sense. Like, I don't think that, you know, I don't think that Black people need to be reminded of hardship or police brutality or those things like that. I think that that's something that is on our channel all day. Like, we look at our phones, we see that on our phone, people being shot by police. Before that, in the newspaper, we see it. You know, when we had Ebony and Jet and all those publications, they also featured those things that were happening in society. So I don't think that we'll ever forget about social injustice. But what we may forget is that we also have moments where we are enjoying time with our family and friends, and how valuable those things are, and how valuable creatively and visually they are to be put in the world for people to see them and see them as normal actions, normal things that we participate in, and things that we should continue to find very, very important and vital for our survival. And that's what I'm really interested in with work. And I see that when I first saw Renee's work, I think it was in Chelsea, it was 1998? And it was yeah. So tell me about the show. I saw the work in the superhero series. I was a young artist at the particular time coming out of Pratt, and I happened to go to the opening. You know, this artist Renee Cox, and and she was doing these amazing portraits, self-portraits. And this particular series, the first time I saw an artist really deal with pop culture in a way that I felt spoke to my generation, because the narrative has switched, and it was a level of this Black female character that creatively morphed into this superhero that was able to conquer and deal with all of these stereotypes that were imposed upon her and us, and she kind of spun it, and there was even a doll that Renee had created that was part of the exhibition. And so
Barbie doll. Yeah, actually she's here with me.
Let me see it.
Look at her. I wanted to have a whole line of Barbie dolls like this, the superheroes.
Can you talk a little bit about that for that show? Can you tell us a little bit about that concept for the show and how it came about and all those different things?
Well, the concept for the show came about because years before that, I was doing, commercial photography. I was shooting fashion, and I shot a guy called Sunman for Essence magazine, and he was supposed to be this superhero. And then I never heard about him ever again. Fast forward, I have 2 children. I'm at Toys R Us. It's Christmas, and they're begging me for Power Rangers and whatnot. And as I'm like squabbling and stepping over people to grab these Power Rangers, I start looking around the store, and I notice there are no Black superheroes. Like they're nothing, zero, zip. There's Storm, who's very ambiguous, right? And then I was like, wait a second, there's a hole here, something's missing. And that's when I went and did research around Wonder Woman, actually. And lo and behold, with really nice synchronicity, I found that when Charles Martin had created her during the 1960s when Black was beautiful, he had created this character called Nubia. And I decided to take artistic license and say that my character, Rajay, who I will also tell you was originally called Rage, but I backed off of Rage because I said they're going to say I'm an angry Black woman if I call her Rage. So then I went with Rajay, which had more of a sort of strange kind of feeling to it. There was that film with Eddie Murphy and Grace Jones. So, and then I just decided to take that and then basically break down these different stereotypes, like releasing Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben from their boxes, going to the motherland and like watching over it, Justice Files. Taxi was another big one because at that time, Black people couldn't get taxis in New York. Every time a taxi stopped me, it's like, I'm not going to Brooklyn, I'm not going to Harlem, no matter where you were going. It was very, very narrow-minded. So I wanted to sort of just break it down and dissolve it, and also provide something that, I don't know, little Black girls could look up to and be like, whoa, I could do that. I can be that too. So that was the main impetus behind it.
But just the images of from the work were just so compelling, because it also had this other thing that was something also new for your body of work. At first you were creating like more stage photos with like costuming and things like this, and this actual body of work brought in like Photoshop.
It was the first of Photoshop. There wasn't even layers when I did this.
Yeah, it was great.
Right. And the only thing you could do to like make things blend was to add some noise to it. But I felt that, honestly, I felt like some pushback, because I felt like the thing that got me the most notoriety was from the Bad Girl show, the Yo Mama piece.
Yes.
That was a piece everybody's like, oh, that's great. You know, 7-foot photograph of me holding my then 18-month-old son, nude, wearing a pair of, you know, stilettos. And people were like really excited by that. And it was interesting because when I did Rajay, people were kind of like, whoa, you know, like, whoa, what is she doing? And
you think you're a superhero now?
Yeah, exactly. It was weird because I felt like, you know, if I just kept doing nudes of me, you know, like every 2 years until I dropped dead, I could have slid right into John Copeland's slot. And, you know, people would have understood what I do. But I'm not that kind of artist. I feel I'm an artist that reflects like where she is in her life situation. I can't stay locked into one thing. I've got to keep, you know, you said something, I mean, I think it was about imagination. My imagination is running wild all the time. And I've been making new work all the time. I cannot be locked into just this one thing. And I think for me, that's one of the beauties of being an artist, and people should love that they can go on that journey with the artist, as opposed to being lazy and just saying, oh, she shoots herself naked. Okay, great. Now we know what she does and who she is. And I don't know, I'm not a fan of that necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely good to experiment. I think failure is something that a lot of people are not okay with, or the idea of it. But I think that, you know, there's a lot of success comes from failure. And I think that failure comes from trying to come up with things that are in your brain and you want to see them in real space. Right. And sometimes they look like you think they're going to look, sometimes they don't. But I think it's important to, I mean, for me, and I think for you as well, is to kind of think about the world and think about what I feel is missing, what I don't see in art. And I
want to see beauty. I want to see the fun. You know what I'm saying? A lot of times I go to Chelsea sometimes and I'll go into a show and I'll be like, oh, Lord of mercy. I need to talk to this artist. They are suffering here. They're producing some ugly shit. You know, it's like, ugh, you know, I mean, like, what's going on? I think, you know, and some people in the art world, they scoff at that, you know, oh, it's supposed to be, you know, sort of edgy or this, that, or the next thing. But I'm like, no, why can't it be pure? And why can't it be, you know, whatever, mystical, fun, happy? What is
Yeah,
wrong
it can
with
be.
happy, being happy?
Yeah.
I
I
don't,
mean, it can,
you know, people have said to me like, oh, but you know, it's only when like you're depressed and you're like that starving, you know, artist that they produce their best work. And I'm like, I don't think so. You know, what
yeah,
is the
yeah,
other side of that coin? What would they have produced if they were you know, if they were happy and they weren't freaking suicidal? What would that have
exactly, no,
looked like?
exactly.
You know, but
I mean, I
you
think
know,
that, art doesn't always have to be ironic. Things don't have to be topical. When there's things you can kind of flip through the magazine or flip through the newspaper to see certain things that are just, I think being an artist, and that's the one thing that I always remember from the writer Bell Hooks. She says that art is just not about telling like it is. It's also about imagining the possibilities of what could
exactly.
be. And I think for me as an artist, and I think for most artists, that's the hardest thing to do. I think
Mm,
that's why most people, would probably settle more on things that are more tangible and more accessible for them on autopilot. And I think that, it's really important just for me in my practice is to constantly think about um, again, I think about the next generation constantly when I'm making work. And I
right.
think about the things that I had the privilege from running a gallery and being around a creative family that were exposed to artists and things like that. And I was exposed through them. But I think there, is something to be said about, my experience and meeting you and meeting Ed Clark and meeting Andre Serrano and a lot of these artists, who were making work, singing Agouti. These artists were, to me, I felt so empowered meeting these artists and meeting you guys. But I feel like the next generation, the range of art is something that is very important for young people to see the range of art and see how many different artists can deal with many different subjects and interests without necessarily feeling compelled to talk about the same thing and to present the same ideas
Well, yeah.
because they're on the surface, because that's what people are talking about. I think it's always important to dig deeper than what you don't see on the surface
And
and
I
try
think
to cover those things, to kind of dig deeper, to kind of think about things that are more subconsciously driven or driving us to be who we are, and for people to see us in a way that they see us, or to even manipulate those things. I think there's so much more work to do than what is so apparent for us to just, instantly make work about things that are just things that you can just read about.
no,
Like,
exactly.
like if that's the first thing that triggers you to make art, then maybe you should stop and think a little deeper and go more into like, okay, what else is triggering you to be an artist, to make art, to think about the culture, to think about what you want young people to see. Like when
Hmm.
I die, I don't want young people to Google my name and see something that's a problem for me attached to my art.
Right.
Now I don't want to see people see my work and see like a lynching attached to my work, the
Exactly.
history of lynching attached to my work. And that's why when I did the show at Mad about sanctuary and about the Green Book, I focused less on the idea of the traumatic experience that Black people had to deal with relating to segregation, because you can read about that.
Right.
But what I thought was very important is that a post office worker, Mr. Victor Hugo Green, on his time off, decided to create a publication to help Black people get around the injustice of society. And that I felt that was what people need to know more about Mr. Green and what he did, and how
Right.
important a citizen who took it on himself to create this publication without anyone telling him to do this, and how it saved lives and how it changed the course of Black entrepreneurship and the way that we were able to gather and prosper financially, because this person created a publication to help us sell stuff and for us to get customers to come patronize our businesses. And to
Right.
me, that was the most important part about the Green Book, not the part about black people being lynched on their way somewhere. I mean, I know that happened. That's important to know. There are artists who are going to talk about those things, and I want them to. But we don't have to talk about those things. We have to talk about many things in order for people to understand the true history of black life and how we exist in this world. Like, people should know that these were black businesses that people went to that are no longer around, and that by doing this show, Mr. Green also became an archivist. He wasn't even trying to be an archivist. He became an archivist because the places mentioned in the Green Book, most of them don't even exist anymore. And if we didn't have the Green Book, we wouldn't even know these places existed in these cities.
Right.
Because the cities didn't catalog these places, these businesses where historical things happen. They gentrified these neighborhoods, and now we don't even know what happened.
No, they destroyed those neighborhoods.
Yes, so it's important for us to know like those things. And for me, it's really encouraging when I see a situation that needs to be corrected and adjusted as an artist, and I step in and try to think about how I can empower the next generation to look at that history in a way that's going to make them feel more empowered instead of feeling more victimized, as we always are in that position to feel like that, because we are being that in some ways.
Well, it's like when I did Yo Mama, it was like the whole thing of being an artist, a female artist, and deciding to have children. I mean, which you wouldn't think was an earth-shattering idea, but at the time,
how was it?
It was. People were like, I was at the Whitney program, in fact, when I got pregnant with my second child, and people were like, oh my God, are you sure? Like, what's going to happen to your career? I mean, literally. And I'm like going like, where am I? Like, this is like some like weird parallel universe. I already have one kid. I didn't get knocked up in a corner. We planned this. And it's like, why wouldn't I have kids? Oh, well, the curators are not going to take you seriously and this, that, and the next thing. And I was like, no. Yeah. No, I mean, for that, and I still have women ask me about that, how is it, and I always say to them, I say, look, have your family, have your children. And as I was saying to somebody earlier today, I said, look, when I die, I want to make sure there's at least 2 people there that will truly be upset, because the art world is not going to be there holding my hand when I take the last breath, unless I got a pen in my hand and I'm signing a piece off. Okay, that's where they might be there, but that's it. So I was like, oh hell no, I'm gonna have my family, I'm gonna have my dog, my children, my husband, the whole kit and caboodle. I'm not going out alone. And I say that to young girls now. I say, beware, be careful, because the society tells you, wait until you're like 40, 50 years old. I'm like, I don't think you really want to do that. Think about it. Yeah. So I definitely hear you on that. I mean, like the floaters. I mean, the floaters are just so floating. Like, I love that body of work. And the way that you had it installed at the, Hudson River Museum, I mean, it was like, that was great. And the vibe of the opening was incredible. You were happy people.
It was definitely, the work itself was a reflection of, the crowd, and the way they responded to the show was a reflection of the work and the efforts and the interest I had in making the work. And I really thought about, when I was making the floaters, I thought about this idea of just levitation and, an idea of the body being just, immersed in this blue space, and how this blue space could act as both the sky and water. And, and how these objects that are, these flotation objects could just kind of be the basis or the base for these figures to kind of exist in, because, the Black body is such a political body. It's a body that cannot be without politics. So to put them in this space where they're the context of who they are and what they represent is kind of juxtaposed with this object that is something that is very much part of pop culture or American culture, and it actually is the most highly recognized object right now of leisure, and the fact of doing absolutely nothing.
Exactly. I got a pink flamingo in my pool.
you know, and when you're on there, there's nothing else you can do but sit on there.
Exactly.
And I thought about that one day in 2015 when I was in my studio, and I was considering, this body of work and thinking about how to represent the figure. And context for me is always important when I'm dealing with representation.
Right.
And that was one of the things that I looked on Instagram in 2015, and I hashtagged floaties, and I didn't see any black figures on floaties in 2015. And I just said to myself, like I always do when I don't see things, I say, you know what, I'm just going to paint it myself. I'm going to paint it,
Right,
you know,
exactly.
and I started painting them. And when I first started painting, it was really a very loose gesture of doing it. And I wanted to be very loose and very whimsical in the way that, and they kind of existed from then on in the way that I feel as I start, each set of figures, they've changed in a lot of different ways based on those things. And I feel like it's important for them to be representative of two things: how I feel and how I believe the figures should exist in the space. And for me, I love, coming to my studio and turning the lights on. I love coming to my studio because every time I open up the door and turn the lights on, I feel happy to be creative,
Right.
to be able to deal with, again, being a black man walking outside, I'm vulnerable. Anything can happen to me,
Right.
and I know that. But in my studio, when I'm working, and what I can achieve through my creative output is something that is all mine, and I'm going to hold onto that dearly, because without that, I don't think that is hope for any culture.
Right.
If the people of the culture cannot imagine, cannot fantasize, cannot be mystical, can be spiritual, can be without an explanation of why you're doing things, then there's no reason to do it. I don't think you have to have an explanation for everything you're doing, but you can have a motivation for why you're doing it. And that's what
you can have a feeling. I always say the best idea comes from the heart. And I tell students this. I say, look, listen to what the heart is saying. I know people say go to the brain and whatnot, but I'm like, you go to the brain, it's going to be a mess, and it's going to be ugly, and it's going to be, you're going to need a shrink, and you're going to be on antidepressants and all this other kind of crap. Go to the heart, listen to the heart, don't second guess it. And then when you need to do the production, that's when you go to the brain, because the brain is a tool, okay? But we're not supposed to live in the brain 24 hours a day, contrary to what society is telling you, because society, with its capitalist instincts, wants you to buy this, buy that. So it tries to make you feel insecure rather, at every given, turn. And for me, that's when you start getting like the beautiful stuff, the real stuff, the stuff that speaks to not only me, the artist, but to the others out there. It speaks to them. Because it's like, I'm like, bring joy. When I did Soul Culture, it was like me creating my own freaking worlds, made up of lots of other people, but they were portraits. It was still one person. And it was this very spiritual, conscious world that was without ego, without the jealousy, the this, the that, because even the stuff that we're fed in the media, like if I'm watching television, it's terrible, because it's like I can only watch like home decorating shows, and because everything else is about murder, scandals, forensics, all this like really negative stuff. So that's it. And I tell people it's toxic, and they go, oh no, you're just being this and that. And I'm like, it's entertainment. I'm like, do you realize what you're saying? You're telling me watching other people suffer is entertainment? Like, have we not gotten past the Romans, like with gladiators at the forum being killed in front of you? You know what I'm saying? You call that entertainment? That should not be
normalized. That should not be normalized.
Exactly.
And there's ways that you can fight those things and be a part of those conversations without actually watching those things or making art about those things. Not saying you shouldn't, but there's ways you can be a contributor to the culture and a contributor of change without feeling compelled to respond by making work about the people who've killed people.
Exactly.
You know, why would I make a portrait about someone who killed someone that I think is? Why would I make a portrait about a cop who killed a young black man in order to politicize that experience? I mean, I understand that, you know, some people feel moved to do that, but I feel like I don't want to immortalize something that I feel shouldn't get that much attention, should not get that much praise. You know, I also understand that as an artist, when I was asked to do a work for voting, and you know, artists, you know, is an initiative where people are asking artists to create artwork to promote people to vote, and I said, you know, I'm a Democrat, and I said, can it just be a Democratic vote artwork? And they said, well, no, it's really about getting everyone to vote. And I said, but I don't care about everybody voting. I just care about
this. We got to start a black independent party. That's what I said.
I don't care. I said I don't care. Yeah, I don't care about everybody voting. I'm not a person that promotes everyone voting. I just want to vote for what I think is important to vote about. And so I wouldn't do a everybody vote artwork,
right?
Because I'm not making a piece of artwork to make a person that I think is not encouraging things that I think are important to know to vote.
Right.
I'm very focused on what I want people to take away from my work, and I don't want to get any kind of confusion about my interests. And my interests are really more. I'm a very community-oriented person, and I'm really focused on the way that, you know, Black people have lived, Black people have survived in our society, and I think that regardless of the success that you see in the world, there's still a lot of work to do, because even for us, even for Black people, seeing images of my work of joy and Black people at leisure makes some Black people uncomfortable, because they don't think that we should present images like that when other things are happening in the world. But I think it's equally important, if not even more important, to counterbalance those other images with works that celebrate who we are and our level of perseverance and the things that, you know, we overcome. We've been through a lot of stuff in America, in the world, and we're still here. We're here in different ways. Some people are surviving more than others, but we're still here. And that's something we should acknowledge every day, and we should praise that every day, and we should make work about it, and we should talk about it, and we should be very, very forced to feel that this is important for people to know. To know that, you know, like you said, ring the alarm. The name of the talk. It's about talking about the idea of perseverance.
Exactly. And thriving.
And thriving. Yes, and thriving.
Because I mean, I get the survival part, but I'm all about the thriving part. You know?
Yeah, me too. I mean, you just don't want to just survive. You want to also thrive.
I want to fucking thrive. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
I want to be running my own game and seeing it the way I see it and tell it the way that I see it. And there'll be some people that'll go along with me, and there'll be other people who hate me. And that's okay. You know, if I get 50-50, I feel like I'm good, because not everybody gonna love you. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's important to speak one's mind. And especially nowadays, there's certainly no point in holding back on anything.
No one else is.
No, exactly. And the shit that they're saying is frigging crazy. And so much misinformation and whatnot, and not factual. So I mean, it's time for, there's no more pussyfooting around. It's time to be like, bang, in your face, which I always believed in.
It's good to have a position.
Now more than ever.
It's good to have a position and make a position strong and make it valid and be informed by whatever you decide that you think your position is. If you're gonna come with something that is informed and educated and researched and you feel passionate about. And I think that's what I think about when I'm, as an artist, what I think about as a person. And when I think about, you know, legacy, that's what I want to leave behind. I want young people, next generation, to come to a museum exhibition or any place where my work is, and feel the empowerment that I'm trying to communicate through my work. And I felt like Hudson River Museum captured that in the most purest form ever. I've never had that experience. Actually, I was overwhelmed by the way that people responded to the show. because I didn't know people were going to be dancing in the museum. Like, you know, I created this
Oh,
body
they
of work,
were.
and they were dancing, they were running around in a circle. They were, I mean, it was definitely something that was emotionally empowering for me as an artist to see that, and how art can influence a certain level of excitement and social engagement. And I'm, you know, and I'm hoping that that's something that will become normal and
Right.
normalized in museum exhibitions, because I think that art should speak to people on in different ways, and it should not just be for academics, you know, because we all, like you and I, come from an academic place, but I'm not always interested in
That's
having
nice, but it gets boring.
It's boring. It gets so boring. It's so boring, you know. And you know, I'm motivated, but most of my work is not motivated by my academic peers as much as they are my friends who are just hanging out, having a good time, who happen to be academic people. It's not the thing that they're talking about that we learn in school that is what's motivating me to make my work. It's
I
about
always
that.
said that was like the kiss of death, because if you were reading, like, you know, any one of those, you know, philosophers at the time, I'm like, they were not happy campers, because if they were happy, they wouldn't have written stuff like that.
Yeah.
They were so conflicted. And when I was at the Whitney program, people would like read this, and you know, they'd maybe get through one chapter, and then they'd make some ugly piece. And then it would be like, oh, I'm so sorry, I missed that chapter that's describing the ugly piece that you just produced here, you know? And it's like, I'm like, you can't go by that. Those people were like I said, they were not happy campers.
There were people at the party looking at everyone at the party, writing stuff down, criticizing everyone at the party.
What?
You know?
What do you mean?
I said most of those. I feel like a lot of those critics, when I'm reading those.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Criticism,
no, exactly.
I feel like they weren't having fun at the party. They were looking at the party, critiquing the party.
Right. No, exactly. And that's not the way to go out to a party.
No, you put to go there open-minded and ready to have fun, to engage and to learn something, and to learn, engage with others, and to have a certain level of humility, which is very important to think about.
Right. No, and I mean a love for humanity too.
Yes.
As opposed to like trying to constantly, you know, break it down and dissect it and so on and so forth. That's not very interesting at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Derrick and Renee, it's Andrea. I just was wondering, before we go on to questions, did you want us to bring back any of the slides?
Oh, that's true. We didn't even show.
Oh, yeah. What happens every time Renee got together? We just talk. We just talk. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, please. I mean, I know, Andrea, you had a couple of questions you wanted to throw in there.
Right. Yeah.
And, maybe we can answer one. Maybe we can answer one or two before we open up.
Oh, sure.
This is from Soul Culture.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the images if you want.
I was going to say, well, this one is, okay, this one is from Soul Culture. This is Derrick's image, part of the floaters. Derrick.
Yeah, this is from the series, The Floaters.
Right.
I mean, I think it's a great time for Renee. Anytime Renee and I get to talk, it goes. What you guys are hearing is basically what we do when we get together. We just talk about things that are important to us, things that we think are significant to the culture, and how and how important it is to to think about these things in a way that will allow us to prosper, and for us to continue to be creative and think creatively about what we do, what we produce, what we want to put into the world, our impact as creatives on the world through our production. Those things that are, I think, my purpose for my existence as a person. I'm an artist, and I believe that there's things that you're going to be known for doing, if you do it well. And these are things that I'm interested in.
Just making a little change in the world's perspective.
Just a little change, little changes, they build up and they mean a lot.
They make a difference. Yeah.
Do we have questions?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with a question from Isabella Lee. And she says, I'm interested that what are the issues you think should be explored in artwork these days in terms of stereotypes and identities?
I mean, I think that you should make whatever you want to make.
Yeah.
But I think you also should think about what kind of outcome you want to have from what you make. What
Right.
are you trying to what is
What
the
do you want
response?
to say?
Yeah, what do you want to say? What do you think is missing? If you see, I'm the type of person, an artist, if I see my peers making one particular thing and if I feel they have that area covered in content and topic, I'm not going to make work about that because I think that they have it covered. So I don't need to make that type of work.
Right.
You know, just
or
like
unless I think I didn't take it further.
Yes, unless you take it further, you know. It's like,
if I look at say a Betty Saar, you know, her liberation of Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben, which was perfect, you know, love her.
Yeah.
But I also knew, wait a second, I can take that inspiration and create this whole other thing.
Yes.
Like that.
And you did.
Exactly.
You know, and you did, you know, but I think of art like this. It's like a potluck. Everyone should be bringing mac and cheese.
Exactly.
You know, like we don't need a whole party of mac and cheese. So if you know someone's bringing deviled eggs, if you know someone's bringing deviled eggs, maybe you should bring something else.
Right.
That's what I think. You know, until it's a balanced meal. Right. You know, unless you're gonna do something with the mac and cheese that can't be done or have not been done, that's a different story. But I think that, you know, with art, it's very similar. And for me as an artist, I would never discourage any artist from making whatever they want.
Right.
But I would also
unless
encourage.
It's ugly.
Yeah. Well, that's subjective. You know, that's subjective. Some people like ugly. You know, but
that's the only place where I want to be a dictator.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a question from N. Paul. Have you both ever thought, I guess I'll come back on screen.
Yeah.
Hi. Have you both ever thought about doing a collaboration using works from Discreet Charm of the Bougie and Brilliant to speak to similarities and differences within the Black community from a socioeconomic, recreational, and social gatherings?
That's definitely a possibility.
Right. That's not a bad idea.
I think it'd be great. I think that we have a lot of interest. I think we have a lot of topical interests, you know, with our work, and I think that we are driven by similar responses to societal things. I think that our work comes out of those things, looking around and seeing things that we feel are a defect, and having a perspective that kind of brings back the conversation and gives us more power for where we are. I think that's definitely a possibility.
No, for sure. I mean, because those representations for me, when I did the Discreet Charm and the Bougies, again, like Derrick said, I mean, there was something missing. I'm like, wait, how come I don't see Black women presented like this, or traveling and, you know, going on this sort of spiritual journey of it, you know, and it was like that to me. There was like a really big hole there, you know. Yeah. I mean, the quintessential one is, you know, the housewife in her Dior suit, you know, with the old mama behind, the white maid and stuff like that. You know, I'm like, why not? You know.
We have a question from Sarah Collins. What do you think about the New York Times Magazine photo spread of Black Lives Matter activists in Minneapolis? And she thanks you for this panel.
Well, I think that for me, Black Lives Matter is one of the most important movements of our culture. And I think that the founders are definitely, to me, the most admirable of a lot of leaders, because they basically created a space for others to be a part of. It's, you know, most organizations, they're usually like a leader. I don't think that Black Lives Matter was designed to have a leader or an idea of a person ahead. You know, it was designed to be like a joint compound. And and that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important. And I think that's the reason why it's so threatening to other forces, is because they can't really put a face on who is Black Lives Matter. Because in the past, as Black people, we've always had one person to lead us like Martin or Malcolm or other political activists. And this particular time, we don't really have a head. We don't have a person who, we have these three strong women founders who are willing to speak and have spoken numerous times, but I don't think they consider themselves in the same way in the kind of like, I guess the kind of aristocracy system of who's in charge, who is the most important. I think they're more about thinking about who can speak on certain matters in a most informative way than other people when they are speaking. And I think that to me is a very important thing to think about this time we're in, and looking at Black Lives Matter is, if you feel threatened by it, is because you feel maybe you're a threat. If you feel threatened by it, because I don't think it's a movement that is inclined to put out threats. It's a movement to make change and to think about change. And all the people who are part of Black Lives Matter are not just on the ground protesting. They're people who are making very strategic moves and helping educational systems that are not just always visible in the media. And I think that somewhat may be more of a threat to a lot of people who think about Black Lives Matter, because there is no straight ahead viewpoint of who's at the top, and all these things are happening.
And for me, I think it's a safe position too, because we all know what happens once they have a target.
Yes.
That target is usually taken out.
Exactly. There's no particular target in this movement that you can kind of put a face on who that person is. Right. And I think that's the strength of this movement, because there's so much fear and also danger in being the head.
Right.
And I think this is because of that reason. I think that it's a very important movement, and I think it's a very important organization to support. And it's not that this particular organization.
And I hope it stays focused too, because as far as I'm concerned, Black Lives Matter. This is the first thing we need to take care of, is Black lives, to make those changes, the systemic racism, all the structural things, and the thing that gets me a little bit is because I see all these other people trying to creep into it, all lives matters, this one's lives matter. And I'm like, no, focus one thing at a time, stop killing our youth every goddamn week. Okay. And once we reconcile that, then we can start dealing with all the other lives that matter. But for 400 years, this shit has been going on. And it's ridiculous. Even yesterday. I mean, it's gotta stop.
There are a lot more questions, but I did want to say I have a lot of faith in this next generation, because the way that they're organizing is very much the way that the internet is kind of distributed authority, distributed responsibility. And I do think Douglas Rushkoff, a media theorist, wrote about how this generation's way of organizing does not place a figurehead in the spotlight. And it's very different than the counterculture or the civil rights movement or any of that. So we have a lot of questions. So I'm going to jump back onto questions. Michael Hallspan, who says he's a friend of yours, Renee.
Yeah.
Michael.
Hi, Michael.
He's asking, this is related to that last question. So we're in the days of COVID-19, sheltering at home, which is lessened now. The movement for justice for George Floyd, the political climate. How is all of this confluence of all of this affecting your work?
I don't know, for me, just made me sort of try to speak out a little bit more, because the only way I see this reconciling itself, there's two ways with a revolution, right? We know the violent way where everybody gets killed. There hasn't been a non-violent revolution ever historically. So I don't want to personally go that way. And the only other way I see is, for instance, for folks in the Black community to form a Black political party, like a Black independent party, not to run candidates, okay? But to be able to use that 30 million votes as lobbyists use it, and to be able to negotiate with these politicians and be able to say, okay, look, we can provide you 30 million votes, but here's my list of things that you're going to have to take care of in order for me to do this. and
Yeah.
to start playing the game, because we're not really playing the game. I mean, we've been a bit co-opted by the Democrats because we don't get
Yeah.
anything out of it. They just simply say, oh, we got the blacks, we got the, all the brown people and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I feel like, to me, that's like the first focus. Then you have to start thinking about your media, how you're representing Black folks, because I don't know, we don't have any media anymore.
Yeah.
We are corporations. We don't have corporations anymore. And even our education has been abducted because our historically Black universities, the best, they're going to, the Ivy Leagues, right? And then when they come out, it's not like they can go to a Black corporation. They got to go and work for a white corporation. And I'm really
lower
about
level,
sort of
lower
getting,
level with high credentials. I said, well, on the lower level with high credentials.
Yeah, but I want to get that sort of Marcus Garvey philosophy back into the heads of folks. You know what I'm saying? Because we've done it before. We did it after Reconstruction until they came and they destroyed it and started the Klan and Jim Crow and all of that. We had it in Black Wall Street and Tulsa and other cities across the United States. It's not impossible. It's been done before. And I'm like going, as Black folks, I think we just need to sort of come together and start doing that. Because if we don't, I don't see like how it's going to work out. And every other group that's here basically does that. If you look at the Asian community, Chinese people, they can come here from China. They don't have to speak a word of English, and they can get loans from, Chinese community, banks, so on and so forth, start their businesses and thrive, right? And we have nothing like that. And I'm going like, but there's no reason why we can't have something like that, And I'm really a firm believer in starting our own thing. Why are we begging Hollywood to be part of it? You know what I'm saying? We're capable of doing our own thing. They did that in Nigeria. I
mean, there's so many things.
The United States is about, people say it's a melting pot. For me, it's not a melting pot. It's like a hot pot. Okay. And if you go to hot pot, one side is spicy and the other side is mild. Okay, now start splitting it all up, and that's what the United States is. They don't mesh together, and I like the fact that things are different. Yeah, exactly. I like to be able to go to Jackson Heights and feel like, oh my God, I'm somewhere in India with all these Hindu people and gold and whatnot, or I can go to Flushing and I feel like I'm in Beijing. It's okay. I love that. And I think we need to get that going in the Black community. That's where I'm at with it right now. So, I mean, I've been running my mouth, and there's an urge, but I don't want to become like some kind of politician, but that's how it's affected me. That's for sure.
The beauty of, oh, I was just going to say, the beauty of starting this conversation 2 years in advance of the exhibition is like, we can kind of work towards the exhibition and use this conversation as a framework. So Renee is curating an exhibition, for those of you who missed it, at Guildhall in 2023, summer 2023. Sorry, Derrick, you wanted to answer that. We have probably four or five more questions if you all could stay on.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think has been important for me during this time that we're in is that there has been a lot of really important organizations that have formed. A lot of them are grassroots. A lot of them don't have spaces. They're mostly done online. They're giving to other communities in need. People of color have been really joining forces to support people during the pandemic and the quarantine who need money and, who don't have food. And I think that's really important. I've also been really focused on, supporting spaces. What I feel like was going to really be more of a challenge as we move forward economically is not that individuals, organizations, nonprofit organizations won't have support, but it's very important for us to continue to support spaces that are nonprofit, that are allowing these other small organizations to host their events in it. Because we need a space. We need spaces. We need spaces to host things. It's important. A lot of spaces that are nonprofit are not having renters right now. They're not having people using that space for readings and for poetry readings and from live music type of things and things that brought their income. This is a time where we need to support those organizations right now, because those organizations cannot close. once they close, a lot of things that we're trying to do as grassroots organizations with no space, we will have no space to do these things in. So it's important, if you want to support organizations, support a lot of nonprofit organizations and these urban communities that benefit mostly off of renting spaces from them to do your events. So if you can give money to these spaces, you can give them to, you know, Harlem Stage, Schaumburg, Studio Museum in Harlem, in Baltimore, UB Blake Cultural Arts Center. There's plenty creative alliances. There's spaces that are around that need money to continue to stay open, so we can to allow us to have exhibitions still, and and still be valid when this thing all ends. What we don't want to find is that the spaces we used to go to are now condos because people couldn't afford to keep them, in these neighborhoods, and now the places are closed, and now you have no space to do your poetry readings or your live music things or your writer workshops or your exhibitions.
I was gonna say, talk about just briefly like what you're doing in Baltimore.
Oh yeah, so 2 years ago I decided to, purchase a property in Baltimore and create an artist retreat, residency of sorts for Black creatives, because I feel my work has been really focused on this idea of leisure and the Black body in leisure and what that really means politically. And so I thought to take it a step further as an artist and to create a physical space where artists can come and creatives can come, writers, culinary artists, visual artists, other business people interested in doing things creatively can come and spend time on this property, somewhat like a bed and breakfast type of thing where you can actually relax and get some of the downtime I feel we need, especially in this political environment we're in now, where everything is so tense and people are being victimized in such a way that I feel like as creative people, we take on the responsibility as being the representatives of these conversations in our work and in our lives. And we stop sometimes being creative and we channel our creativity to being more direct for the sake of feeling like you have to speak a certain way because of what's going on and you want to be a part of this thing. But for me, I think creativity is very important, and to keep that alive. I think Black radical imagination to me is something that I feel is way more threatened than anything else. And when we start losing our imagination, then I feel like that's the real idea of oppression and how oppression is really most effective. In most cultures where people stop making art is usually a culture where a dictator has occupied and people are not allowed to be creative and do the things that they want to do. And I think that we can be, in danger of those things based on the overburden of speaking politically. As artists, as Black artists, every time we're in a museum exhibition, our role is to be the political person in the exhibition. That's our role that we play in most institutions when we're included in the show. We are usually given the task of doing more community outreach, or being part of a community outreach program, which most artists don't have to do. Primarily white artists don't have to do those things unless they're interested in it. But a lot of the curatorial proposals that are presented with Black artists have some type of community outreach involved in the planning around the exhibition. And I think that's really interesting that that's our role in society, that now if we are in a museum, we have to also be a museum educator in our own exhibition. And I think that's a problem. And I don't think that artists should have to take on that role if they don't want to. I don't think that I think Black artists should be able to have an exhibition and not be present for any public programming and not feel in any way obligated because they are Black and because they're from an urban community, they have to actually participate in social activism within the program of the museum. The museum staff should be educated, or at least want to be educated around the theme of the exhibition to be able to educate people based on the work that's in the museum without the artist being present. And I think that's what we need to work on for the future of exhibiting in institutions.
That's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I think you're totally right. Do you have time for one more question, Derrick and Renee? It's 6:07. So this comes from Sherry Renee Thomas, and she said, you have both discussed your commitment to subverting stereotypes and creating space for Black joy and experimentation in your art. Do you have any suggestions on how families and educators can create more space for Black joy in the lives of young people, despite the onslaught of terror and trauma? they're witnessing?
I personally think that as a leader or as a person who's a guardian or anything like that, there's always a dilemma. You know, as a black parent with black kids, you always want to feel that you want to let them know what's going on, for them to be aware of what could happen to them, what to be cautious of when you're walking in the street. And I think that, you know, as a black person, those things you're going to learn regardless, because you're a part of the society, and society is going to remind you, even if your parents don't remind you. What I think is missing in our culture is showing us things of joy, showing us art, showing us things, taking us to the park, taking us to the botanical garden, taking us to places that will empower, to museums, Studio Museum in Harlem, taking us to hear jazz music, taking kids to do certain things that remind them of the value of that culture, the value, the commitment that we've been so much ingrained in the culture that people are participating in. That's what we need to be really mindful. Like, don't let the things that are happening in society redirect you from our goal. Our goal is to empower the youth, and the only way we can empower them is to let them know about the achievements that we've been able to accomplish. And the thing is that, you know, think about the people in the past who accomplished these things and even more dire circumstances. Like, what's happening to us in society now compared to what's happened in the past is even traumatic as what our ancestors had to experience. So this is important for us to know, like, okay, what was being invented by black people in 1940? What was being created by black people in 1970? It's so much information we're not being taught in school. That's why I feel our kids they feel sad and they feel lost sometimes, because they don't understand the roots of our contributions to the world. And I think it's important for us to be exposed to that. Like, I learn new stuff about our culture every day, and I'm a grown man, and I'm still learning things that I felt like I should have learned when I was in elementary school.
Well, yeah, but they weren't going to teach it to you. So
yeah, so you know,
that's why I go, like, we need to be. That's another point. I mean, I said with the education, we have to teach our children what our contributions have been. You know, we need a Black Sunday school, is what I say.
Yeah,
you would go in and you would learn about it. I didn't learn about this stuff until later in life myself. You know, I always went to white schools. I always heard their story. You know what I'm saying? I had to go digging deep. I had to go to the Schomburg and go through like microfiche files years ago.
You had to self-educate.
To look, huh?
No, and I don't think kids should have to self-educate. I think kids should have to self-educate when it's topics that are beyond what society should have given.
What I'm saying is we can't depend on society.
Exactly. So
society has failed us in that, and Texas is doing it right now because they write the damn textbooks. They said, you know, slavery, they were indentured. It was a walk in the park. They got dressed up when the master came home and started singing and dancing. You know.
And
if I was white, I would say the same thing. I wouldn't want people to think that my ancestors were complete like degenerates, you know, enslaving people. But that's not the truth of the matter.
There's a certain level of embarrassment that goes with the white American experience and, you know, and the Black American experience. Yeah. And I think that for me as an artist, as a creative person, I think it's really important for us to really give our youth the experience of having joy, and, you know, and knowing that because we're giving them joy, or the experience of joy, does not mean that they won't have the other experiences. Like, I think that
they have to know the history. I go, you need to know the history, but you need to also live, you know, quote unquote, in the present moment too.
Yeah.
Okay. So instead of projecting out into the future, it's like, deal with this one moment that we have. Because when you do that, then you can begin to like get rid of all the mental noise that's going on all the time in their heads. And then there is no joy. I mean, for my own life situation, I mean, I found happiness once I was able to conquer all the noise, all the little voices in my head going, you're this, you're that. And they're stupid voices. Those voices are like, you're a schmuck. Oh, you're not tall enough. You're not this. You don't have that. Blah, 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 blah. You know, I mean, nobody's working on a cure for, you know, COVID or anything with those little voices.
And I would just like to, you know, add to that, you know, like when you think about the topical things that have happened with the black American or blacks, you know, internationally, a lot of the the the, the violence that has happened to the black body has usually happened while they're minding their own business, while they're at leisure, and how leisure for some people is such a threat to see us actually enjoying ourselves that they want to make us not enjoy ourselves. And I think to me that's a really complicated and interesting thing to think about. That the people who have been shot by officers or people who feel threatened, you know, not just officers. Sometimes it's within the neighborhood of where people live. Certain things have happened. It's usually a time where people are trying to live. They're trying to experience life. They're trying to, you know, to be who they are. They're trying to live, exist.
And they're still trying to do that, but now you got Karen calling the police on them.
Yeah. That, you know, so it's all these things that are happening, you know. But it's one thing that I noticed that's pretty consistent with a lot of the victims of, you know, of these crimes that's been happening are people who are sitting in the park with their family, people who are at the shopping center with their daughter trying to shop. Guns are being pulled on them because of things that are happening. These aren't citizens. These aren't black citizens who are out even protesting. These aren't black citizens who are threatening people. These are just black citizens minding their business, and the threat of them just minding their business. And it's almost like you have the nerve to think that you can be regular. You have the nerve to think you can just be relaxing. You shouldn't be relaxing. You know, you shouldn't even be seen. I shouldn't have to see you here having a good time, laughing, enjoying life.
And I say, fuck that. I'm going to have a fucking good time, and I'm going to do what I want, where I want, when I want.
Yes.
Well,
that's what I enjoy the most.
Yeah. On that note, we are at 6:15. I love you guys. This is like part one of
now getting into the real nitty gritty of the shit. You know what I'm saying?
I know. I could.
I mean, white America we are constantly having a conversation, but white America needs to be part of this conversation in terms of, you know, culpability. So I mean, it's like they don't get a pass.
Right. Yeah. Well, we're super excited about the exhibition coming up at Guildhall in 2023, curated by Renee Cox. Derrick, a couple people want to know what the name of your residency is going to be and when people can apply or how it's going to work.
Well, it's called The Last Resort. It's the Last Resort Artist Retreat. And it's going to be by invitation only. And it's going to be formed by a group of very connected community organizers or artists or people who are interested in supporting artists and supporting ideas of leisure and relaxation. And those particular group of people will recommend individuals for the retreat. You know, and right now, I don't know if it'll open up to other people. We're gonna start off slow. And
spots, right?
Yeah, we're gonna start off slow and we'll use that data to find out what's the best way to move forward. But probably for the first couple of years, we'll probably just have it more exclusive through invitation. And if we find that that is not as effective, then we're going to move it into opening up and having people apply as well. So, right, you know, we're working it out. I don't want to say anything set in stone about just the structure, because you know, part of being leisurely is not being rigid. And so I don't want it to be rigid. I'm okay with it changing the structure. I kind of want it to be beyond me as the person who created it. And I want it to be formed by ideas of individuals who come and be a part of it. So I'm really open to that. But I think starting out, it'll be more on a smaller invitation scale.
Perfect. Well, it sounds pretty revolutionary, and I wish you best of luck with that. And so let's plan to do another conversation in the future if you're game for it. And Renee, I know you're going to be doing interviews going up until the exhibition in 2023. I want to thank both of you so much. It's kind of an electrifying conversation. And thank Phyllis Hollis for bringing us all together, and Cerebral Woman, and Guildhall, Christina Strassfield, our chief curator, and everybody who joined us tonight. Thank you so much. I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody's questions. You guys have a lot of fans. Check the chat box and you'll see.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in.
What's your Instagram
Thank you so much
account?
for tuning in.
Derrick, your Instagram account.
My Instagram account is Derrick Adams NY.
Okay, and I'm Renee Cox Studio. And I think I'm in the middle of like a freaking hurricane here. Is it pouring where you are? Holy shit!
Nice.
There's like water pouring in here. This is nuts.
Oh no. All right, we're gonna say good night, everybody.
Okay.
Okay, all
Good
right.
night.
Thanks.
Good night.
Have a good
Love you,
evening.
Renee.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.